This is a Millennium. It is a blowback semi-automatic, similar to the Spyder, but with a few changes that makes the gun tournament ready. Some of the features that make this gun a little bit more tournament ready is a metal ball detent. Very simple in design. Metal, spring, and a little bit aluminum cap. Screws right into the side of the gun. Another important feature is a field strippable bolt. With one pull, lean the gun backwards, and the bolt's out. Then you're allowed to squeegee the inside of the marker all the way down the barrel, if you'd like to, and down the feed port. To reassemble, you slide it in the back, making sure your hole is in downward position. Slide it in, slide your quick field strip pin in partial forward position, down, and pull backward, holding pressure on it backwards, and it'll drop right into the hole. Then you can cock the gun. Notice how it fires. Let's look at some animation here, and for you can understand the gas theory and how the gun operates. What happens is the gas comes from the bottom of the gun, your bottle, goes into a valve chamber. It is held there. Your hammer is in cock position behind a power spring. The hammer goes forward, hits what's called a poppet. The poppet blows forward, allowing the gas to escape around the cup seal into the valve seat, into the bolt, and projecting down the barrel. Now, a little bit of the gas is projected out the poppet hole into the hammer. That is what allows the gun to recock. Part of the air is going backwards, part of the air is going forwards. That's how the gas is operated. Here we are with the Millennium. First off, we can take off the grip assembly. As the grip assembly is coming off, you'll need a 1/8 Allen wrench. It'll come down and pull off to the receiver. Then you take off the expansion chamber from the vacuum chamber. If you would like to, you can take off the front of the vacuum chamber. The barrel will unscrew 3 turns. Pull the top pin out of the bolt straight up, and the bolt will fall out the back side. Notice there is a cyclone insert in the front of the bolt. The IVG will come out first. Then there'll be a spring stick, a winter spracer, and a power spring with a bumper in front. Those got to go in those positions. In front of that, you'll have the striker hammer. And notice there's an O-ring groove in the front. That's what allows the gun to recock. In the front of the gun, you have the valve spring, the valve star, and the valve going into the valve seat. To take the valve seat out, you must undo the 5/16 screw underneath the body of the gun. First, you take an 1/8" Allen wrench, and you unscrew the bottom line. You'll have 2 3/8 Allen screws, 1032 screws that'll come out. You'll disconnect the 3-stage expansion chamber on it. Very simple. Screws out, completely disassembles. You no need to take this expansion chamber apart. It's all O-ringed. If you ever have any problems with it, you send it back to us and we'll repair it. Now I'm going to disconnect the grip assembly. The first 2 screws come out, 1/8" 1032 screws. On the Spyder, they'll be metric. They're still 1032, but they're metric threads. And you'll hear it disengage the sear from the hammer. Very simple. It's a 45 grip assembly, all billet machine, sear, trigger, ball bearing trigger, and the safety in it. Very clean, very easy. I'll take off next the vacuum chamber. And what it does, it's held by 1/8" screw in the front of the gun. It'll come out like simple. That's simple. One piece. If you would like to, you can take this piece off the vacuum chamber and clean it, but that's what makes the vacuum. You have a very large hole that goes completely through the system and a very large valve chamber. It allows gas to be stored and directly behind the valve. The next thing we take out is the bolt. It's a field strippable bolt. One pull with a pin, very simple, lean the gun backwards, the bolt will come right out. Now, what you've got to understand, a lot of people do this wrong, is they'll put the bolt back in with the hole the opposite direction, and the gun will not get gas. Make sure the hole, very simple process, is always pointing down. Go into the gun, go all the way in the forward position, go down, then pull it back slowly until it drops into the physical hole. It'll physically drop in the hole. It has to be engaged in that hole. And pull to make sure that it's engaged. If it doesn't, you're going to fire the system and it's going to shear the pin off. Next thing is we need to take the IVG out. Take an 1/8" Allen wrench, you have 2 screws. One comes in. It's pretty important that you hold your finger against this because it's spring loaded. It will pop off and you might lose it in the grass. You'll take this spring out. Now notice the IVG will just slide right out. Inside the IVG, we have what's called a spring stick. This lines the spring up when it's cocked. Plus we have what's called a winter spacer right here, this little spacer. What this allows you to do is not cut your spring. This will allow you to speed up your gun or slow your gun down without changing the length of the spring. We have the spring that we remove, non-modified spring. All perfect, all the coils are all there. Very simple. Then we have a very important piece that people don't forget about. It's called a bumper. This bumper allows the gun, when it recocks, to cushion the impact that it comes back. Without this bumper, it will come back too far, it will indent the body, and you won't be able to get the hammer out. Very important little factor, so do not forget about this. Then inside that, you have what's called the hammer. Very simple, hardened hammer. No wear on it, works very well. And that's the O-ring I'm talking about. That O-ring right there seals this very small chamber. If you go inside here, bring the O-ring hammer forward. That O-ring seals from right there to right there, approximately 3/4 of an inch. And that chamber is a blowback chamber. What that allows that to is when the little bit of gas goes into this chamber and blows this hammer backwards. That's what cocks the gun. What we've got is the valve. I'm going to pull the valve assembly out and set the body down. We've got the valve spring, which is like so. We have the valve star, just like so. And we have the valve stem, which is like so. These 3 things are very important. The valve is what seals the air. The valve star is what aligns the valve in the valve chamber. And the valve spring is what returns and closes the valve. People ask, how does the blowback area come back into the system? Well, if you look very carefully, there's a flat level spot right here. It allows part of the gas to go back into that chamber that I told you about a few minutes ago and allows the gun to recock. The only thing that left to disassemble here is the valve seat. It's held by this 3/32 Allen wrench. It unscrews. Use something soft to push the valve seat out, and the valve will just come right out. On reassembling the valve assembly, remember you have 2 holes. You have a small hole, you have a large hole. The large hole goes forward towards the tip of the barrel. Slide this in. Take your finger, slide it all the way in until it stops. It will hit a pin that's inside the marker, and it will stop. We take the plug, we screw it back in, we reassemble the valve. Take the valve, take the star, slide it onto the back of the valve, take the valve spring, notice there's a small end and a large end, take the small end and snap it on to the cup seal. Now we're going to assemble this into the marker. We're going to take this and drop it into the marker, and it will drop right down into that hole. We're going to take the valve chamber seat. We'll slide it into the valve housing. We'll push it forward, and you have to hold it with your hand because it's spring-loaded. And you'll take an Allen screw, 3/8 of an inch, stick it into the hole, and tighten it. The next step is we take the vacuum chamber, which is by so, slide it into the front, and screw it in. Now we've got the valve assembly completely assembled. Now we're going to put the powertrain together. Do not make the mistake of setting in the bumper first. The hammer goes in first. You've got to understand is there's an upside and a downside on this hammer. This will work with the Millennium and the Spyder. There's a flat mark on the hammer. That flat mark has got to go towards the bottom of the gun. The bumper goes in, it's a little bit tight, and it'll just slide in, very simple, down in. Just a little ways. Then you'll assemble the spring. Then you will assemble the spring stick. Those three parts, very simple. Then you've got your IVG. Your IVG slides in. Now remember, we talked about this earlier, it's spring-loaded, so you have to push it in till the holes line up. Then you take a 5/16 Allen screw, 10/32 thread, and slide in with a star washer. Put both in, should slide right in. Now you've got the body assembly completely built. All we have to do is put the grip assembly and the expansion chamber and the bolt and the barrel back on the marker. To do the grip assembly, shift the gun over to where it lays on its back, lay the grip assembly on, move it back and forth one time. If you notice, I'm going to do this a couple times, it catches in a catch. That's an alignment screw for the screws will always line up. I'll put it on again. What I do is I lay it on, back, forth. I'm making a forward and backward, and it lines up perfectly. You have two screws. The short Allen screw goes in the front. The long Allen screw goes in the back. Okay, now what I'm going to do now is assemble the bolt back into the gun. Remember we talked about this earlier. Remember there's a hole that goes down. This what allows the gas to go into the bolt and project the ball out. That goes down all the time, not up. If you put it up, no gas is going to go out the barrel. If you put it down, it's going to go in the bolt and out. Now when you assemble it to the marker, what you do is you slide the bolt in, drop the pin in partial way. Don't slam it all the way down. Go all the way into forward position. Now go down and physically go back nice and slowly till it drops into the hole. It will drop into the physical hole and it'll be engaged. To check it, always cock the marker first and dry fire it and make sure it is connected into the hole. If you do not connect it in there, when the firing system goes off, it'll shear the pin off. Next thing we're going to assemble is the expansion chamber. Screws on very simple. Spin it on. Now, the way this expansion chamber is designed is this pin will spin any direction that you want. So the way the expansion chamber is designed, it will fit any marker on the market. So now it lines up perfectly. The hose is the perfect length. We drop 2 screws in. Don't seat them till they're completely lined up. It keeps you from cross-threading the product. Then lock them. And we have the barrel to reattach, which lines right up. Now you've got a completely assembled marker. I'm going to talk about a few things on this marker about troubleshooting. This marker is designed with a vertical feed. There's no way of tightening this vertical on the loaders. So I went in between the two different loaders on the market right today. If you've got a loader that's a little bit too tight, don't cram it in there. Trim down the loader. It's very simple to do. If you want to whittle it down with a little bit of sandpaper or trim just a little edge off your revolutions with a razor blade, it'll work out perfect. If you have a loader that's a little bit too loose, take a little piece of electrical tape, lay in there, and put the loader in the feed with the electrical tape. It'll tighten it up perfectly. If you have paint breakage inside your vertical feed, that's telling me that you have loader problems. So check your gravity feed on your loader, your batteries, or anything like that. Another factor that people have is that they shoot the gun so fast that it doesn't allow the ball to feed into the mechanism. A lot of people with shake-up, non-motorized loaders, the gun will shoot faster than gravity will drop. So if you pull the trigger and the bolt sticks and you cock it back by hand and it fires again, check your loader. Pull your loader off and see if a ball is stuck between the breech and the barrel, and that will tell you it's loader problems. Another factor that they talk about is paint. If you're breaking paint down in the barrel, it's probably the problem with the paint. Check your size of your barrels. There's all different size paints, anywhere from 686 to 694. So every barrel will not work for every manufacturer of paint. Another problem is when the gun goes into automatic mode. And this is common with a Spyder, a Millennium, or any blowback gun. Is inside the hammer, there's an O-ring that seals. If that O-ring breaks or wears out of any type, it'll leak by and the gun will not have enough blowback to recock the gun. So you need to replace that about every 10,000 shots, no matter what. That's about all the troubleshooting there is on this marker. If anything else has problems, feel free to call us and we'll work it out on the phone. And if we can't, send it back to me and we'll fix it here and return it the same day we get it. Remember, sportsmanship, play safe, and go out and have some fun. You know, that's the most important thing. Life's too short. Let's have some fun. I'll see you out in the middle.
Paintball Tech Tricks. Learn design theory, troubleshooting, and proper assembly procedures from the masters, as each paint gun is completely disassembled by the top designer or owner of the company that makes the gun. Special, unbelievable animation shows the inner workings of every design type. These videos are ideal to prepare you for Paintball Training Institute certification classes. Paintball Training Institute. In today's dynamic paintball world, you can become a certified PTI graduate and earn top dollar in the paintball industry. All certified PTI graduates are listed on the internet website www.paintball-pti.com. Meet Bud Orr in person and take classes in high-pressure theory, basic airsmithing, advanced airsmithing, player safety class instructor training, refereeing, and more. American Paintball League. APL Paintball Playing Field Insurance, now in our 8th year with new reduced insurance rates. The APL remains by far the largest, strongest, most affordable, and most stable insurance available for paintball playing fields. We also offer unsurpassed benefits to APL member fields. As an APL member, we will design and host your webpage completely free of charge. You will also receive free email. Your webpage will be included in our Internet Field Listings Guide, all free, as APL membership benefits. We don't provide empty promises. to provide superior membership benefits and the same good service and exceptional values we established in 1992.
This is the 68 Automag. It features an all stainless steel construction, blow forward valve mechanism, and bayonet mount barrel. This was the first gun to ever introduce the power feed. It now comes in several models. We also have a mini mag model and a classic model which you can build up to produce whatever type of high performance gun you want. In this particular model, the Automag, we also have rubber grips. Everything that you see on this gun is stainless steel, and it features a single screw to unscrew and get to all the parts. The Automag is composed of three basic components. It has a built-in regulator, which is rare for most guns, an on-off valve controlled by the trigger, and an air chamber and bolt assembly, which is controlled by pressure. The 68 Automag family of guns is based on a blow-forward design. The main difference between this design and other guns on the market is that a spring returns the gun to the cocked position. In all other guns, it requires air to blow the bolt back to the cocked position. What this ensures is that your gun will always be cocked and ready to fire, no matter how low the pressure is. Let's take a look at the cutaway so we can further understand the flow. In this first sequence, the gun is gassed up from the tank and air enters the valve at high pressure. Tank pressure usually runs between 800 and 1,000 psi with CO2, and that comes into the valve area just above the field strip screw, as you see here. Once entering, the high pressure air goes past the regulator seat into the piston area where it pushes against the piston, moves up through the transfer port to the top of the on-off valve, goes through the on-off valve and starts filling the air chamber. All this time the trigger is forward and the bolt is held in place by the sear. Once pressure in the air chamber gets close to its set pressure of about 400 psi, the regulator valve and piston assembly move backward to shut the air off from the tank. At a regulated pressure of 400 psi, the valve closes entirely and the pressure inside the air chamber and through the rest of the system is lower than the tank pressure. From the animation of the airflow, you can see that there's a complex processes going on inside the gun. All of this is controlled by the trigger mechanism. There's critical timing between the on-off valve sealing and the release of the bolt. It's best not to mess with the geometry of the sear system. So let's go in and take a look at the actual parts of the gun. To completely disassemble the Automag, first unscrew the field strip screw and then the front frame screw. This will drop the entire assembly off of the rail. The rail assembly has attached to it the sear, which will come out as an assembly from the frame. Once the valve body has been removed from the main body, it can be separated into two halves by unscrewing the back half, which is called the regulator body. This reveals the major internal components of the gun. The central components are the valve pin, the regulator seat, and the on-off valve assembly shown here. In this view, one can see the spring pack in the regulator body, which pushes against the piston, which actuates the regulator valve. The O-rings are shown in the on-off valve surrounding the on-off pin. The power tube tip, power tube O-ring, and power tube spacer are in the front assembly. As you can see, the regulator body will screw back into the valve body for assembly back into the gun. Once your pieces are back in place, seat the main body into the rail and the rail back into the frame and reinsert your screws. The first thing you want to do to strip your gun is hold the valve assembly and unscrew the field strip screw. This should come out easily If it's a little over tightened, there's an Allen wrench hole in the back of the field strip screw, and you can use the Allen wrench supplied with the gun to unscrew that. When you do that, you must pull the trigger, which will seat the on-off pin up into the valve. The valve slides out, but it does not come out all the way. You need to give it a little bit of a twist to the right, and it'll come out through the Z slot in the rail. Let's put down the gun first, and we'll take a look at the valve. The valve is basically three simple pieces. The first thing that will come off is the bolt assembly, and the spring sort of sticks on the bolt so you don't drop it off into the grass. The next thing you can do to take the system apart is unscrew the regulator body on the back from the valve body. And what you're looking at here is the regulator seat, which again is stuck into the regulator body. It kind of snaps in with a little bit of effort. And the valve system, the valve pin, which kind of looks like a German hand grenade. We call it the German hand grenade. And that's held in place by a spring that's in the valve body. So this is the part here that if you ever get any dirt in this part, this controls velocity problems. Whenever you have a velocity problem, look first to your regulator seat or replace your regulator seat. That is the most critical velocity component in the gun. Once you've got that apart, we can now move to the valve. The valve body has in it the on-off assembly. In this case, you can see it's made up of an O-ring, the on-off top, the on-off pin, and the on-off bottom. In all cases, the on-off parts are prefaced with the word on-off. So you have the on-off bottom, the on-off pin, this is one of the on-off O-rings, and this is the on-off top. Now that we've taken out the on-off assembly, let's look at the power tube. The power tube tip is this brass piece on the end. To get that off, you need a quarter. Quarter goes in the slot. Unscrew the power tube tip. Behind the power tube tip is the power tube spacer. And underneath that is the power tube O-ring. These three pieces serve to seal the bolt in the air chamber. The power tube O-ring is a source of leaking down the barrel. Whenever you've got a leak and you fire the gun and you hold the trigger and the leak stops, it's most likely the power tube O-ring, and that should be the first one you replace. The power tube spacer also controls whether or not you get bolt stick or leaking down the barrel. If you let go of the trigger and it leaks down the barrel, the first thing you should try and do is go to a shorter spacer. These spacers are laser engraved with their length on the side. This particular one is a 220. If the gun were leaking down the barrel, I would go to a 225 and see if that helps. If you're getting bolt stick, go to a longer spacer, and that will prevent the bolt from sticking. At this point, we've disassembled most of the parts in the gun that are required for maintenance. We've talked about the fact that if you have leakage down the barrel or you have bolt stick, you should work on replacing the power tube O-ring or the power tube spacer. There's a thing we haven't talked about yet called lawn sprinkler. If you fire and hold the trigger on the gun and you hear a intermittent air leak down the barrel that goes tst, 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 that's called lawn sprinkler. Lawn sprinkler can be fixed easily by replacing this small Teflon O-ring on the top of the on-off assembly. We've also talked about the fact that if there's velocity problems, velocity usually has a problem with the regulator seat. So you should clean or replace your regulator seat. Now that we've gone through all the parts of the gun, let's go ahead and reassemble it. Starting with the power tube, we'll take the power tube O-ring, put that in first. Next, we'll take the power tube spacer. And lastly, the power tube tip goes in on top. Screw that down and tighten it up with our quarter. Now let's move on to the on-off assembly. We'll put the valve body down for a second. We'll pick up the on-off bottom and the on-off pin. We'll slide this in here. We'll put the on-off top on the on-off pin, and that'll fall off. So what we'll do here is we'll use this on-off O-ring to hold the entire assembly together. Now that we have the on-off assembly together, we'll take the on-off valve. There's still an O-ring left down in there. That's usually not a problem O-ring. And we just pop the on-off assembly and seat it in the valve body. Now again, that stays in there so it won't fall out. Next, we move to the regulator valve, which has been cleaned. We look at our regulator seat. It looks pretty good. Pop it in. We screw the two halves together. When you screw them together, you can line up the logo. Now we have the valve assembly back together. The last thing we do is we drop on the bolt and the bolt spring. Now that we've gone through the valve assembly, let's take apart the gun chassis and see what we have. First, unscrew the barrel 1/4 turn to the left and pull it out. Next, use the supplied Allen wrench to disassemble the frame. You go in and unscrew the front frame screw. At this point, the frame will come easily off of the rail. Now we can lift the main body from the rail. And we have left the sear assembly. In order to take the sear out, it comes out through the top of the rail. You push up from underneath, slide the sear forward, and it'll come out through a hole. The sear pin will slide out from the rail, and there you have your sear. Right here is the golden clevis, and it's connected to this rod. This rod is pre-adjusted at the factory to give a small clearance between the trigger and the sear assembly. Do not adjust the length of this rod. It will only screw up your trigger geometry. Next, let's take a look at the barrel assembly. The barrel has two O-rings on the outside, which are used to make a snug fit between the barrel and the main body. They also function to hold in the wire nubbin, which keeps your ball from rolling forward down the barrel. If you look in the end of the barrel, you can see the wire nubbin will protrude about the thickness of a matchbook cover into your barrel. And that's what you want it to do. The combination of the main body and the barrel will tell you what's wrong with your gun if you're having ball breakage problems. There are two main causes of ball breakage in the Automag. Number one is the wire nubbin is not protruding far enough into the barrel. Number two, the balls are not feeding correctly through the power feed tube. This is usually caused by a feeder which is not capable of keeping up with the Automag's rate of fire. There's an easy way to tell whether you're having problems with ball feed or with paint. Occasionally you get bad paint that blows up in the barrel also. Paint that's bad will blow up down the barrel, and you will not see any paint in the feed tube. If you're cutting a ball in half as it feeds in and you've got a feed problem, paint will come up around the outside of this feed tube. So there's two distinct ways you can tell. Sometimes you may have a feed problem, other times you may have a paint problem. Now that we have the gun all apart, let's start putting it back together. First thing we'll do is we'll pick up the rail, we'll pick up the sear and the sear pin. We'll put the sear pin inside the sear. We'll drop the assembly through the rail, and we'll seat it down in the rail like so. Next thing we'll do is we'll pick up the main body, and we'll seat the main body completely into the rail, making sure that the back edge is seated completely inside the rail. From this point, we need to assemble the frame, being careful to stick the sear in behind the trigger. If you pull the trigger forward, you should see the back of the trigger rod coming out behind the sear. Holding the assembly together, we'll drop the front frame screw in the front. Make sure you keep the washer underneath the frame screw, and we'll tighten up the front frame screw here. Give it a little extra torque. Okay, so that's your completed assembly of your frame, your rail, and your main body. Next, we'll take the valve system, making sure your on-off pin is fully depressed and all the way up in there. slide it in. On the back side, we can see the pin on the back side that's going to slide into the Z slot. It slides forward. We give it a little twist, and all the way back to the front. Come up with your field strip screw. Slide that in the bottom. Find the hole. Screw it all the way in. Screw it down tight. Now we have the valve system back in. Lastly, we take the barrel, push the barrel in, find the slot, lock it in position. For purposes of this demonstration, we do not have the hose attached to make it a little clearer, but ordinarily you would have a hose running down to your bottom line adapter. At this point, you can air the gun up and it should be ready to shoot. Do's and don'ts. If you're going to consider buying an aftermarket barrel for the Automag, please buy a brand name barrel. We work with the major barrel manufacturers and give them the blueprint so their barrels will interface correctly to our gun. Also, bottom line adapters are a great accessory for the Automag. Run a hose any way you'd like into the valve. But when you get those hoses, make sure they're large enough on the inside diameter to flow enough air into the gun. Aftermarket grips, great. Trigger frames, quality manufacturer, should have no problem. Adjustment of the trigger rod is sometimes an issue on aftermarket frames. Make sure you get someone to install it for you that knows what they're doing. CO2 systems can benefit from an expansion chamber on the front of the gun. There's already a pre-drilled hole in the rail to mount such a thing. The very best accessory you can get is compressed air system. With the compressed air, the gun will maintain its maximum performance over the entire pressure of the tank. With the Automag, we work with manufacturers to ensure that you have a rich variety of accessories to go on your gun. Now that you've disassembled and reassembled the gun, it should be ready to shoot. If not, you can always call Airgun Design any weekday and we'd be glad to assist you in getting over your problems. We have a long history of giving good customer service over the 10 years we've been producing the Automag. You're in our computer if you send in your warranty reg card. So give us a call, we'd like to get to know you.
Paintball Tech Trix. Learn design theory, troubleshooting, and proper assembly procedures from the masters, as each paint gun is completely disassembled by the top designer or owner of the company that makes the gun. Special, unbelievable animation shows the inner workings of every design type. These videos are ideal to prepare you for Paintball Training Institute certification classes. Paintball Training Institute. In today's dynamic paintball world, you can become a certified PTI graduate and earn top dollar in the paintball industry. All certified PTI graduates are listed on the internet website www.paintball-pti.com. Meet Bud Orr in person and take classes in high-pressure theory, basic airsmithing, advanced airsmithing, player safety class instructor training, refereeing, and more. American Paintball League. APL Paintball Playing Field Insurance, now in our 8th year with new reduced insurance rates. The APL remains by far the largest, strongest, most affordable, and most stable insurance available for paintball playing fields. We also offer unsurpassed benefits to APL member fields. As an APL member, we will design and host your webpage completely free of charge. You will also receive free email. Your webpage will be included in our Internet Field Listings Guide, all free, as APL membership benefits. We don't provide empty promises. We do provide superior membership benefits and the same good service and exceptional values we established in 1992.